Welcome back to the Mature Male Podcast. I'm your host, Wes, a psychotherapist helping men mature through timeless wisdom and practical guidance. Today's guest is Rob Thompson. Rob is a husband, father, Christian, and writer of a Substack publication who is passionate about helping men become the spiritual leaders their families need and that men desire to be. His work focuses on authentic masculinity, spiritual awakening, and practical guidance for men navigating the challenges of modern life. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, Wes, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, excited to chat today. So you have written about how being around other men helps teach you what to do in your life, like a model. And you believe that environment is stronger than willpower. Many men today find themselves isolated, putting up facades instead of sharing authentically. Could you speak to why male community is so crucial and how men can break through that isolation to connect genuinely with other men?
Yeah, environment is stronger than willpower. And, I think at times men, we have a challenge with this because, we want to be self-sufficient. There's maybe a subculture or just a viewpoint in our society a lot of times that you got to have it all together. You can't have any flaws. And it's a damaging view because if it's a mindset that you have that you're supposed to have it all together, that you can't have any flaws, then when you need help, and we all need help, we don't reach out. So being in an environment where you're constantly around other men who are growing, who are thriving, who have weakness, who aren't always perfect, what it does is it gives you permission to not be perfect. And it gives you that encouragement and that support to keep going, right? Because at the end of the day, willpower comes and goes. But when you're in an environment, even if there's not willpower there, that environment can help you to sustain you. It can help sustain you. It can keep you going. It can keep encouraging you. And really that's the power of being in the right environment. And that's what we believe that men should it's a necessity. You gotta have it in your life at some level.
I agree. It's an essential. And I'm curious, did you grow up with this belief in your own family that communities of men were really important, or is that something you found later in life? And then also, what does male community look like for you nowadays?
No, it was not something that I grew up around. My father died when I was 2 years old, and he had some friends that they stepped in and they were good mentors to me. They didn't live in my home. So I didn't get to see what it was like to live as a man and how to be successful, how to be vulnerable when you need it to be, how to have friendships, I think is a key part of that. And it wasn't something that I experienced in my life until later on and into adulthood. I had surface level friendships. I guess you could say that. Like I had friendships that were, hey, how's it going? We celebrate our favorite sports teams together. We cheer our teams, we watch sports, that kind of thing, which is great, builds camaraderie, but there wasn't anything deeper. There was no challenging to go and accomplish what we knew we should be going after, right? And as I got older, I began to see other men who were winning. They were winning in life. And I I wanted what they had. I realized that if I was going to get what they had, I needed to learn from them. And so I just began to get around them as much as possible. And as I got around them, I learned so much about their mindset, about the habits that they had in their life. And that was really when I began to experience that transformation in my life. And so, just being around those guys, it was something that was just a part of like the culture. It's just like, hey, man, we're going to do this. Come with us. Or we're going here. Come with us. Right. And so that was whenever I first started learning the power of community and started having it in my life at a greater level, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sorry to hear about your father. I resonate with that. Actually, my father passed when I was 11.
Okay.
And I'm curious if you felt this way because as you were talking about not having that growing up, same here, like some males stepped in to kind of help, but I felt just kind of patchwork together wasn't really there. And I actually found same surface level friendships. And then when I did find mentors, there was definitely this underlying father like figure I was seeking in those. And I'm curious if you also found that to be true, because a lot of my friends find it kind of strange. I found mentors are people to model after, how to be male in college. But I honestly felt like that motivation, that drive, because I didn't have it growing up. So I kind of, it pushed me to find that. I'm curious what your experience was like and all that.
Yeah, that's good. I think for me, it did create a drive for sure. I think my drive was to just have an amazing family, specifically where I could connect with my kids, with I could connect with my wife, because for me that was the missing piece that I didn't have, was the familial connection to my dad. So it caused me where I wanted to have an amazing family. I think I was like maybe 15 or 16 years old. And like, that was my goal. It was like, oh man, I just can't wait to have an amazing family. Right. So it's kind of funny to think about having that desire as a young teenager. But um, I definitely think that as I began my journey and through the wrong turns, I took a lot of those, but through the wrong turns, man, there were definitely father figures that stepped in, and I did embrace them because I know some guys that I was around growing up, they hated their dads. So they didn't want anything to do with their dads. And so there was friction there. They would rebel. They would, man, dad wants me to do this, but I'm not. I'm going to do something different, right? I didn't experience that overtly, I think, because I wanted that. And so anytime there was a mentor that was in my life, that I really embraced them as much as possible. Even at times when, it like they would encourage me to do something and didn't really want to do it. I mean, like, I would still try to embrace that guidance from them. And so it was something that I wanted. Didn't always necessarily have it as I needed. There were times where I didn't seek it out. Um, and as a result, I think that was why I took some of those wrong turns. But, eventually, as I learned to just embrace it and go after it more, like, I'm in a place now where I go and I seek it out. I don't wait for it to come to me. There's guys that I go to now just because I've learned, because I've hit, made so many mistakes over the years. I've learned to embrace, wise counsel, and is what is kind of how I say it. And
Yeah, and I'd like to get to that later, how a guy can start to pursue and find male community. I respect that you put the onus on yourself if you see the need in yourself. It's also really beautiful that at 15, and unfortunately what led you there to have that such strong vision, but still, it's really beautiful. And I agree. I think deep down it shows how we were created for connection and family, and that father loss is irreplaceable. And you can step into it in your own life, but beautiful and sad. And yet, and here you are living that, which is just the best. And I think it gives a lot of hope for people out there who have experienced loss similar to you and I, to say, yes, you absolutely need to honor and respect that that was a detrimental loss. You can't replace that. And life can be more than what you've gone through. And like you said, you usually learn by making mistakes. But as you humbly put it, if you can learn from those mistakes, you can make the most of it and have the life that you were created to live.
yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of living the way you were made to live, you've had your own experience of what you call waking up to your spiritual life. Curious, what does that awakening process look like for men? What typically holds them back from this spiritual growth? And what are the key factors that are getting them to wake up?
I think for me, I use the phrase spiritually asleep or asleep at the wheel because it describes someone who, when you're driving a car, you've got a responsibility to lead that car, to turn the steering wheel and direct the car where it's supposed to go, to keep all of the inhabitants safe and to arrive at the desired destination. So many times you hear stories of people that get in accidents, they have collisions, and at times they even die from it as a result of it because they fell asleep at the wheel. And, I believe that there's a desire, I believe that God put in every man to lead his family spiritually. and lead his family in general, I should say, but definitely spiritual leadership to guide them in that direction. And I think it's a great desire, but I think that a lot of men struggle with not feeling good enough to do that. And as a result, they push back from that desire or that responsibility because they think they're not perfect, they don't have it all together. They've got this idea of what you need to be, who you need to be in order to lead in that area. So they push back on it. And as a result, just like that person driving the car, falling asleep at the wheel, their family gets in a collision, is injured. That's what's happening in a lot of men's families. Is what was happening in my family. Proverbial asleep at the wheel. I wasn't leading spiritually. I wasn't growing spiritually myself. And as a result, man, my kids suffered. You know, my relationship with my wife was stagnant. I mean, there was just a lot going on, and our lives were going in the wrong direction. And it wasn't until I had that wake up call that things began to pivot for us.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you can speak to that wake up call, maybe some signs that made you finally realize that you needed help, you needed to change, and what that change looked like in your life.
You know, I think my oldest daughter was struggling with anxiety and depression, and there were things, that as she was going through her challenges, there was ways that she would react, and it was almost like I didn't want to deal with it, like because I didn't know what to do. And so it was like, let me maybe act like it's not happening, and then it'll go away. You know, there were other warning signs that I saw just in me and my wife's relationship, where we weren't spending as much time together. I was constantly working, constantly away, and we felt there was a disconnected feeling there. And again, you can look at this and say, man, this is just leading in general, which I agree with. And so it was one of those things where I was maybe acting like, you know what, it's okay. Nothing's wrong. This is normal, right? And those are some of the things, our financial situation was, we were in a tough financial spot as well. And just life wasn't great. And again, these things happen, but it was almost like I was avoiding paying attention to them. I was trying to, maybe ignore them thinking that they would go away. And so those were some of the warning signs that I saw. And as I got around other men who were winning in those areas, their marriages were growing and thriving. Their relationship with their kids was awesome. Their businesses, they were business owners, they were growing in their businesses, and just life in general, right? I call it the fruit of their lives were great. They were bearing good fruit in their lives. And it was attractive to me. And so I was like, how can I experience the same thing? And that's really when I began to just dive into that community and those other men. And it was through those times that we, would hang out, connect, and I would hear what they were doing and hear the way they thought that challenged me. And I began to wake up and say, man, I'm not leading like I'm supposed to. I've got to make some changes in these areas. And that's when the shift started happening.
Yeah. Hey, you bring up some good points about how as men going, and you had said this at the beginning of the episode about this myth of self-reliance, because you just think, I think it's called toxic shame, really, right? Is that there's something wrong with me if there are things wrong in my life. And instead of just realizing that's totally normal, you can't predict how your kid's going to turn out, and life is really tough. You weren't given a guidebook for how to handle some of those more intense psychological experiences, and, finances. Everyone goes through those struggles of balancing it and getting it wrong, and then feeling, especially as a provider, right? Gosh, where am I going wrong? I want so badly to have that security, and I don't have it. And yet it continues to pile up. And like you're saying, so wisely, it just took you looking around, which I really want to hone in on that point, because so many men, I think, try to look beyond to like a famous person or a really successful CEO. But what you're saying is brilliant, which is just look at the people around you. And if you don't have those people, well, that's a problem. You need to go find them. And it might take a little bit of effort, but it sounds like the models you were looking for from a reciprocal standpoint were right around you. And when you decided to open your eyes and were able to see that, you were welcome with open arms. And it seems like your ability to be open to that, receiving help, and those men, inviting you into their lives, it seems like the transformation really took off from there.
I think you're right. One of the things that has held us back as men is this idea that we have to have it all together, especially the shame. You hit that's the thing that keeps us from that connection. One of the things that was really instrumental in finding those guys was I had to begin going to church, which is one of the things I pushed back from because I didn't feel good enough, right? And so, but as I did that, because I needed it, man, that's where I met these other men who were, man, they were also in a similar place where they weren't perfect, but they were still going after the goal, right? They were still pursuing that desire to lead their families and get the results that we're experiencing the transformation. And so I had to learn to let go of that shame, that guilt, that condemnation is another word that we say, but learning to let go of that and really embrace, I believe, who God made me to be, which is his son, right? I believe he forgave us of our sin. And so once I embraced that new identity of, you know what, I'm forgiven, right? Like, and it's not based on my performance. It's not based on me doing everything right, and there's a scripture in Romans 8, and it says that God transferred righteousness to us through faith in Jesus, right? So his righteousness or his perfect relationship with him, he transferred it to us through our faith in Jesus. It wasn't based on what we did. So that freed me up. Once I got that revelation, it was just like, okay, Rob, it's not about perfection, right? Now, what we do matters, of course, but it matters for a different reason. It's not going to make me accepted, right? It's going to help me to grow, but I'm already accepted, And so that was pivotal because once I got that understanding, it was like, okay, now I can focus on the areas I need to grow in because I don't have this fear of rejection. It's more of like, hey, now we're going to go be effective. Let's go be effective. Let's change the way we live and do things differently, embrace new habits so we can produce good fruit and not necessarily to feel that acceptance.
You brought up some solid points, a lot of wisdom in there. The first one is that when you bring your honesty about the shame into community and into your relationship with God, you're confronted with the fear of abandonment and rejection. And every time you're met with love and acceptance, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean there's that enablement to say, this is what is allowed to happen and anything goes, right? But it does mean that, okay, within the accountability, I'm going to bring out the best in you. And what I also got from that is this phrase I like to use, which is community combats competition. And
Yeah.
you stop trying to just earn the most and build the most muscle and, own the most things, right? And it moves into how can we each find our best selves and live out of that place together, right?
Yeah.
And lastly, within that, there's this beautiful reality in the word that you said about being effective. And I really appreciate that word too, because that also is something where I think a lot of men don't realize is the appropriate way to live is. And I always ask, how functional is your life? If we were to look at how well you're actually living, how's it going for you? And I think that's the point you're making in that.
So well said, man. You hit the nail right on the head, Wes. And I think in order to get, because how you're living is important, because how you're living is in large part the reason why you're in the situations that you're in. Whenever we understand that, but you can't start there. I think for so many men, we want to start there without first having that acceptance, that understanding that, listen, man, hey, You're not, I'm not here to judge you based on your performance as far as do you belong. Like you're already accepted. You're good enough, right? So now man, that was perfect how you talked about community. It's not competition. It's hey, how can I run my race to the best of my ability and help you run your race to the best of your ability so that we can all win our race? And the thing I love about community is I can look at, my friend over here and I can say, man, the way he's running his race is inspiring. It's inspiring for me because maybe right now I'm in a season of life where I'm not running my race like I should be. And so I don't compare myself from a negative connotation that says, well, I'm a loser and he's a winner from that regard. But I do, because we have two different races that we're running. But I do look at him and say, listen, we have two different races, but he's running his race to win right now. And I'm not as much as I should, right? So what can I do? How can I make adjustments so that I can run my race to win? And that's really what that mindset does. It frees you up to be able to run that race in community. And you're able to accomplish so much more than if you were just trying to white knuckle it and use willpower by yourself in a vacuum, so.
Thanks for those kind words, and it was a excellent reflection as well. And I really agree how many times when you're an insecure man, you always have to either push people down or be climbing to reach where someone else is. And your beautiful analogy about the race is you're the only one that can run it, and how this is a net positive sum game where everyone can actually get better when you're around other people who are healthy. There's actually a lot of studies that show leadership at its best is not trying to say there's one person leading and they're amazing and everyone relies on them, but that true leadership is saying, I'm going to live my life in a way that makes everyone else around me better. And they feel safe and they feel secure and they feel encouraged to run their race. And it's just so cool to see you look to other men who were leaders for you to help you get to that point. And now you have a family where you're doing that at home. And I imagine you're doing that with other guys. So it's just beautiful, man.
Yeah, and you get to a place where you experience a breakthrough. You get some understanding that you didn't have before, and it gives you different results. You're so grateful. You just can't help but share it. And you're right, like that's the way to live, just that perpetual cycle of, man, this blessed me so much, how can I share it with somebody else? This enriched me so much, how can I, not keep it to myself but help others as well? And that's the point, right? And so doing life together with other men, it allows you to do that on a consistent basis and invite other guys in that don't have that need it, that are looking for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about the gratitude and that sense of being generous and self-giving with your time and your money and your other resources. It's something that is very rare historically among men in present day, just this sense of selfishness, right? Like I'm just looking out for me. It's all about what I can do and I'm working hard so I can climb whatever ladder of success. Leads me into my next question I was going to ask, which is there's so much discussion about what healthy masculinity looks like today. And I imagine you're having some of those with your boys already. You emphasize the need for men to step up, be assertive, and take action and responsibility, which I love. How do you balance this call to this masculine strength within those characteristics I just mentioned with the cultural conversations happening around masculinity today?
Especially if you're a father, you're going to have to make a decision on, what you believe and how you're going to go forward with leading. If you've got sons, and even if you've got daughters, how you're going to exemplify what what a true man looks like, what a good man looks like. And I think for me, I've lived both ways here, and I'll say this: I've lived both ways where there was one point where my view on things was really contingent on the culture. So I would look at the culture and I would a lot of times adopt a view that was based on the culture. It was based on my experiences. And that was a losing battle for me because experiences change, culture shifts. And if I'm basing my viewpoint on that, then my life is going to be up and down, left and right, constantly evolving and moving. And growth is not bad, but whenever definitions and fundamental beliefs change constantly, there's no stability there. You can't build anything worthwhile and sustainable from something that has a shaky foundation. And that's when I made the shift in my life that, hey, listen, my viewpoints, and some people may agree with this, they may not, but my viewpoints and how I view life, how I view what a man should be, who a man, what I'm to do, I've got to form those from my faith, from God's word, from the Bible. Like that's what's got to form my values, my makeup. If I do that, so if I say, okay, I'm going to no longer just go by what the culture says, but I'm going to build it off of these values and these truths, this foundation. You know what? One way the culture could be going in that direction, and that's great. But if the culture shifts and goes a different direction, then that's also great because I'm still steady. I'm still changing. I mean, I'm still stable. And so I think specifically for those characteristics and me teaching my boys, it's the virtues that we find in the gospels, being humble, right? But also understanding who you are and not shrinking back from that, taking responsibility, right? We've been given, I believe, a mandate to help others and share God's love with others all around us, no matter what we're doing, working at our job or connecting with neighbors. And so things like that, those are the things that form who we are as people and specifically as men. And that's the way we choose to, and I use that word strategically, that's the way we choose to live our lives because there's a lot of different options. But when we choose to live our lives that way, there's stability there.
I've never thought about it like that, but it's so true, which is if you are basing your primary truth in your experience and in culture, it will change and it's not trustworthy because you really can't follow it either, right? I mean, it's not giving back to you, but yet it's asking you to be something, to do this, to do that if you want this or that. And your framework, which was said, so wisely, is you have to pick a truth to follow. And in your case, you call it capital T truth, right? It's God,
Exactly.
it's Jesus. And
Yeah.
that is the way the truth and the life that all go together
Yeah.
in one way of living. And even if you are not Christian, it's important to find a framework that is trustworthy and that has the virtues that hold the ability to follow and emulate. You mentioned the Gospels. I think this is why I'm really finding a lot of men in particular are turning to religion and Christianity, even if they're not fully ready to follow Jesus, like as their way of living as a Christian. They're looking at the Bible. They're like, everything I need is here, right? We have morality, we have ethics, we have the way interpersonal dynamics, how we treat people. We have just everything you need is kind of packed into here. And like you're saying, none of us do it perfect, but you have a guidebook. And the brilliancy is you're teaching your sons to find out what that looks like for them. It's not like you are pointing to culture and say, okay, humility looks like that, and just do what they're doing, right? You're inviting them into reading the Bible too and praying with God to say, okay, son, like, hey, what does humility mean to you? What are you learning about that? Where's it showing up in your life at school, etc.? And so, anyways, I couldn't agree more. It's something that we both attribute to Christianity, and I find it to be helpful. But even if for those listening, you're maybe not ready or open to that, that's okay. Find some sort of framework that's going to be trustworthy, helpful. And you said this subtly, but I think it's so powerful. It's got to make you better. if you dive in and you're not becoming a more true and loving and authentic and integrated person, then it's not worth following. I also, when I followed culture, just became disintegrated and insecure and aimless and all the things opposite of, once you find the truth. So, yeah, I just appreciate you sharing all that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm curious, dovetailing off that a little bit, for those listening that have kids and are particularly young boys, if you have any examples or guidance for how you're having some of these conversations around masculinity and identity and anything that may be helpful to think about or to try out. I think about that even though my son's really young. I'm already nervous about making sure, how do I talk about this? What does it mean? And I've heard from several other young fathers that say the same thing. So just curious if you have anything first there.
Yeah. I think two things come to mind: intentional time and proximity time. These are two things, two practices that I've have learned to implement in my life with, in regards to leading and training my boys. So by intentional time, Monday through Friday, there's 15 minutes that we just all come together as a family at 8 o'clock. And it's just 15 minutes. It's not a long time, but it's an opportunity for me to take something that I'm learning, in my individual time of studying the Bible. I take one verse, maybe two verses at the most, and we gather around. We all go around and say one thing we're thankful for. We read the verse. I ask them questions to engage with it. We share a takeaway and we pray together. And that's it. It's not a long time. It's only 15 minutes, but it's strategic. It's intentional. Scripture tells us that I call it the incorruptible seed, but it's God's word. It says it doesn't return void, unfruitful, or unproductive. It accomplishes everything it's sent to accomplish. So just like I know if I've got good corn seed and I plant that corn seed, I know in the right environment is going to produce a harvest of corn. If I'm intentional about planting the incorruptible seed of God's word in their hearts, helping them to get understanding around it, in time, it's going to produce a harvest in their life of good fruit. And so that's one way. And then the other way is something that I've had to learn through just some pain, and that's the proximity time. There's a season in my life where I was so busy. I was working all the time, running a business, and there was no margin that I got to really spend time with the boys and with my wife. And I've got two girls too. And so as a result, man, my influence was limited. And so as I began to make changes there and say, okay, you know what? I'm strategically just going to increase the amount of time that I have to just be around them, having fun or just doing anything, whether it be yard work together or whether it be, playing games together. Just being around them more is going to allow what's inside of me to get in them just on a casual level. It's not a specific lesson or anything that I'm teaching or sharing, but it's as we live life together, I get to sharpen them, right? Just from just our interactions, we get to connect at a deeper level. And so those are two ways that I am using to intentionally train my boys and my girls, but to have that influence in their life so that I don't get to them being 18 and leaving the house and I'm having all of these regrets around, man, I wish I would have. I wish I could have said that. I wish I could have taught them that, right? There's a confidence and a peace that says, hey, I've given them everything. They are ready. We get 18 summers with our kids. They're in the traditional school system, or even if they're not. We have to be strategic with that time. I've got an oldest who graduated high school this year. This is our last summer with her. Then I've got some other ones. So when you understand that, it causes you to look at things differently. One of my mentors, he does something every summer called Saturday Adventures. And every Saturday during the summer, he and his kids and his wife, they're going and they're doing something together. So usually from the end of school, when school gets out, till all the way through August, you got 13 Saturdays. 13 Saturdays to connect with your kids and to really just, yeah, have that proximity at a greater level now that they're not in school and other things like that. So it's just about being intentional. And anyway, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, so much there, Rob. I mean, I appreciate that first point, how you have something consistent and you have something that's approachable. You're not asking your kids for a full hour. It's very quick, it's 15 minutes, but it's every single day, Monday through Friday. I also love how it's the whole family. I think that's super important to not just, of course, while one-on-one time is good with your kids, having these touch points is just so rare. I mean, even if you have dinner, it usually isn't sitting down for long. And then lastly, I like how you have a particular practice that you use within the day. So it's not that you have to come up with something new. You're not wasting time with anyone getting confused on what the deal is. Everyone knows. Say what you're grateful for. Reflect on what Dad is saying, and that you're setting the tone by bringing something to the table to say, "Hey, I've done the work. I've done the preparation because I'm thinking about this." And you're almost that pace setter. And now your kids, I mean, maybe they're not reading every day and being intentional to the degree you are, but age appropriately, like you said, you're planting those incorruptible seeds. So that way, when they're like your daughter going off to school, they're going to know, or, wherever life takes them, they're going to say, you know what? I maybe looks different for me, but I'm going to find what it means to be consistent and disciplined and committed to practices and committed to God's word, all these things by what you did. So I appreciate that. And then the second thing you said about proximity, couldn't agree more. It's very true. I had a guest on who had an interesting take on Western rites of passage. You often hear these rites of passage from these villages, we're in South America or Africa, and there's kind of these intense ceremonies. And we think, well, what's it like for men in the West to do this, or America? And he said it was historically agrarian society, because you would be working beside your dad. So while you were out plowing the fields as a man or having your own business, your boy would be right there working on your car, chopping wood, whatever it was. And obviously, present day, it doesn't look like that. But to your point, that's more or less what you're recreating, which is all these touch points. Scott Galloway, who works in the men's world, calls it garbage time. He says it's things like taking out the garbage and washing the dishes and reading together, going on walks, adventure time on Saturdays. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think in the moment, it probably feels like a big sacrifice because you have other friends you want to see. I'm sure you have other personal things. But like you're saying, I think it's such a good reflective test for men to think about. Fast forward to the day your kid leaves the house. How do you want to feel? Do you want to feel at peace and dignified and knowing I gave it my all? It wasn't perfect, but I really created the genuine enoughness and space for my kids? Or is there going to be unresolved time that deep down you go, man, I wish I had that back? And guess what? You won't. And I think that memento mori, remember that you'll die, remember that life is short, remember that we only get weeks during the summer and 18 summers. That's such a good framework, man. I appreciate you saying that, because when you're in it, it can just feel like, oh, gosh, like again. But then when you look back, you're going to be thankful you did it.
Absolutely. It's always one of those things where in the moment, it can, maybe at first, it feels like, oh, it's a sacrifice. The other day, I was come home from the office and, I had my phone out, or I think I was getting ready to open my laptop and work on some things. And my wife looked at me and she just kind of gave me the symbol like, hey, put it down, put it down. And I appreciated her for doing that. And at first I was just like, oh, I was trying to finish something, right? But I did. I put it down and I engaged with the kids and we had the best time. I mean, it was awesome. And I looked back, at that and I was like, man, what I was working on, yeah, there was some satisfaction that would have come from being done and finishing it. But I got way more out of spending that time with them before they went to bed than I would have from just accomplishing a task that I could have done later. It would have been there. But that moment with them, I would have not gotten back, And so, I think when we think of the reward, keeping that in our mind, where it's just like, okay, yeah, I like to do this, I like to do that, but really at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it's going to feel really good having had this time and having made it quality, right? It may not be a long time, but boy, was it quality. Did we have a blast? Did we have a good time? And that's what I have to keep reminding myself. And, I encourage other dads out there to do the same.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I certainly struggle with that too. And I think it is just a really simple but challenging question. What's most important? Really, at the end of the day, what is most important? All of it matters, making sure you get your work done, spending time with your kids, being present, being proactive. But really what matters most. So I appreciate that framework because it's something that we all constantly need reminders of. And shifting gears to the last question, a little bit more of a serious topic, but something I believe you have a lot of guidance to offer in your personal experience of it. Many fathers today are facing the challenge of supporting their children through mental health struggles. I'm a therapist. I see a lot of kids and I talk to parents, and it's tough. I think there's a lot of factors that go into it, anxiety, depression, even self-harm, and these rates with the effects of social media and all that. So I'm curious, from your perspective as a father, how should men respond to and support their kids through these difficulties?
I would say to just encourage other men that maybe find themselves in a similar situation. First thing I would say is you're not alone. You're not the only one going through this. You're not the only one experiencing this challenge. It's not unique just to you. And so I would say that first is recognize that you're not alone. Other men are walking through this or have walked through this, and they've done it successfully. So it's not hopeless. The second thing is, I would say, don't run away from being the leader in your home. Initially, as my daughter started experiencing challenges, the temptation that I had was to, maybe I just need to let her pull back and let her figure it out. Maybe, I need to just let her kind of explore and all of these different things. And my encouragement to you is no, they need that leadership and support now more than ever. They need that structure. They need that reaffirming, right? More than ever. Don't pull back. Don't go hands off and say, maybe they just need to figure it out. Continue to lead. Okay. And here's how I did that, how I learned to do that. I wasn't doing this at first, but I learned to do that with consistency of affirming who they were, who God created them to be. So many times that struggle with, anxiety and depression can come from not feeling good enough. You said it, Wes. Social media has been really damaging in this area for a lot of specifically teenagers and adolescents, but helping affirm them, hey, listen, God loves you. He accepts you. Dad loves you. Dad accepts you just the way God made you. Really helping them feel secure and established in that love. They are in the family. Nothing they can do can kick them out of the family, And I think, helping to reaffirm and just establish that in my oldest daughter's life was really what helped her to begin to feel secure, and for her to begin to, even at a greater level, embrace the help that she needed from us, from her therapist, from other friends and mentors that were really wanting to encourage her and support her. And then, providing that structure and that guidance. And so one of the things that we did is we said, hey, we're going to continue to show up at our 15-minute family devo that we do each morning. I'm not going to give you an out on that. We're still going to continue to go to church and get plugged in. I'm not going to give you an out on that. And so still having standards. And that's really where it's about leading and not just pulling back, but providing the love but also still having that guidance that's there that says, hey, these are the guardrails aren't going away because they're there to help us. They're going to help us continue to thrive. And it's amazing because when I thought that I was helping by pulling back, pulling guardrails down, but that's when I saw more chaos. That's when I saw more confusion. And it wasn't, when I reversed course and said, hey, let me go in closer. Let me provide that love, support, and guidance. And obviously a teenager, they don't always like their guardrails, right? They push back against the guardrails at times. But I just kept him there. And, to see where she's at today, she was taking probably 3 or 4 different types of medication at the time to help. And to see her at a point now where she's not on any, her psychiatrist is like, she's great. She doesn't have to be on anything right now. She's getting ready to step into this internship that she's joining, and her life is thriving. We're seeing her come out, her true self, right? We're seeing it come out more than ever before. And I'm so grateful that I did re-engage. I'm so grateful that I did provide that support and I didn't just stay hands off. And so she's excited because Wes, she wants to go into the profession like you. She wants to help other people. She wants to
That's
be a
cool.
therapist.
That's beautiful to hear, Rob. Again, such wisdom in what you shared. The first thing is just to know, even though in the moment, again, with the shame can creep in from the enemy to say, you did it wrong. If only you had done that, or it was because of this that this is happening, the accusing, the blaming, and not getting it into the light and sharing. And, going back to our first point about finding male community and getting real with the other guys, man, hey, my kid just going through it. Right. And I imagine there were times you shared, even like you and I today, you shared about your dad, then it opened up me to share. We realized we bonded over that. And same with your kids. It's like you never know who's going through something. And unfortunately, the statistics say it's almost anyone you talk to either directly knows by experience or knows someone who is going through that. And the ability to get it out and beyond yourself into community is really important because you can't do it alone. Going back to the self-reliance part, you need community, you need help, you need that support. And then that second point, I really appreciate it, is keeping the guardrails, keeping the standards in a world where so many parents are bowing down to their kids and doing what they think and saying, oh, well, if I back off, if I play it chill, if I act culturally in tune, then that'll be better. And what you said about having more chaos, that hit. I was like, exactly. Like, it's counterintuitive, but what your kid actually needs most is the stability, the security, and the predictability. And the last thing they need is for someone to join them in their unpredictability and chaos. Because as much as they might not want to show up to the morning Devo or to commit to the family, what you're teaching them on a deeper level is 2 things. One, what you're going through isn't more powerful than the collective of what you're a part of. It's really important. We want to honor what you're going through as being real and difficult. And guess what? It's always subject to the community. And then the second thing is your ability to show up, not dismissing how you feel because that's toxic, to just bypass that and say, I'm just going to forget that happened and keep moving, but to name it, but then not let that get into a victim mentality to say, well, now because this is happening, I can't do that. I won't do that. And I can say, working with a lot of people, that victim mentality of going through a wounding or traumatic experience, ironically, is the thing that keeps them in bondage to the trauma or thing. Instead of saying, this is difficult, but I'm going to find a way out. I'm going to show up to Devo. I'm going to show up to my family. I'm going to take these steps. And to your daughter's credit, now medication free, the natural way we were meant, is just so beautiful and inspiring to see, man. So I just want to say you've done an obviously amazing job as a father, and thank you for sharing those examples of how some men and parents can go about these situations.
Absolutely, Wes. Thank you for that, man. I feel like it's been a journey of mistakes and a journey of, readjusting. And so I hope that encourages other men Like, I didn't have this all figured out ahead of time. I made a lot of mistakes in the process, and it's only by the grace of God that we got here. But needless to say, you can experience, and anyone listening to this can experience the same. They can experience the same thing. It's regardless of how they may feel like they've messed up, it's not too late. It's not too late. So, yeah.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you giving that word of encouragement. It's been such a gift to have you share your stories and your wisdom, your experiences and insight. And if people resonate with this, I'm curious where they can find your work and follow you.
Yeah, if they just go to thefamilychamps.com, they can find more about just my journey and just all the ways that they can use the tools, some of them that I talked about on the podcast today. We've got some frameworks and templates that they can download and get access to for free. And yeah, to help them out.
Cool. Well, thank you again, Rob. You're doing great work in the world as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a brother. So I appreciate you taking the time. We'll put everything in the show notes. And guys, until next time.
Thank you.